One of the first and most undeniable signs that you carry the presence of God is the peace that rests within you, even when everything around you is falling apart. This kind of peace is not something you can manufacture with positive thinking or hold on to by sheer willpower. It is not the result of perfect conditions, nor is it the absence of problems. It is a peace that surpasses human understanding, a calm in the storm, a steady hand in the earthquake, a quiet assurance in the middle of noise. Life by its very nature is chaotic. We live in a world full of uncertainty where economies collapse, relationships strain, bodies break down, and news cycles are dominated by fear. Anxiety has become the norm, and worry seems almost like a badge of responsibility. But when God's presence fills your life, you find yourself standing in the middle of that chaos unshaken. It's not that the storm doesn't hit you. It does. It's not that pain never comes. It will. But somehow in the middle of it all, you are anchored. That anchoring is evidence of God's presence. Psychologists often describe anxiety as the mind's inability to sit still in the present moment, because it is either racing toward the future in fear or replaying the past in regret. But when God is with you, he grounds you in the eternal now. He reminds you that he is Alpha and Omega, that he stands at the beginning and the end at the same time, and that nothing in your story has taken him by surprise. That awareness produces peace. It's not denial of reality. It's a deeper recognition of who truly controls reality. Think of Jesus asleep in the boat during the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples were panicked. The winds were raging, the waves were crashing, and their lives seemed at risk. But Jesus rested. Why? Because peace is not about the absence of waves, it's about the presence of God. And when his presence is with you, you can sleep in situations where others are screaming. That is the mark of divine peace. Now let's be honest. This peace doesn't come naturally. Left to ourselves, we are reactors. We react to bad news with worry. We react to betrayal with bitterness. We react to loss with despair. That is the human condition, but when the Spirit of God dwells in you, he transforms you from a reactor into a responder. A reactor mirrors the chaos around them, but a responder reflects the calm of the one within them. That shift is not psychological trickery. It is spiritual reality, and here's the thing, peace doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you never cry, never wrestle, never question. Even Jesus wept. Even Paul despaired at times of life itself. The presence of God does not numb you. It steadies you. It gives you the ability to walk through valleys and still keep moving forward. It allows you to acknowledge the pain without being consumed by it. Philosophically, peace is one of humanity's deepest longings. People chase it through money, relationships, power, and pleasure. But the more they chase, the more elusive it becomes. Why? Because peace is not a possession you can buy. It is a person you must know. You can lie on the most beautiful beach in the world and still have turmoil in your soul. Or you can be in the middle of a battlefield and still be at rest if God is with you. That's why Scripture calls him the Prince of Peace. Peace is not a thing. Peace is who he is, and let me tell you, when you carry this kind of peace, people notice. They may not understand it, they may even question it, but they cannot deny it. They'll ask, how are you so calm? How are you not falling apart? How are you still smiling when things look so bleak? And that's when you get to testify, not about your own strength, but about the God who carries you. Because this peace points beyond you. It points to the presence you carry. Now there's something else to consider. The enemy fears your peace. He knows he cannot steal your destiny, but he will try to steal your calm. Because if he can rob you of peace, he can push you into making rash decisions, living in constant fear, and abandoning your faith. That's why guarding your peace is so important. Don't give everyone and everything access to your inner world. Protect your mind, filter what you allow into your heart, because once your peace is compromised, everything else begins to unravel. Carrying God's presence means living from a different source. The world waits for circumstances to change before it feels peace. But the believer anchored in God's presence carries peace into every circumstance. The world says, when I get the job, when I get the relationship, when I get the breakthrough, then I'll be at peace. But the child of God says, even if the job falls through, even if the relationship ends, even if the breakthrough delays, I will remain at peace because God has not left me. That is the testimony of someone who carries his presence. This kind of peace has a ripple effect. It not only stabilizes you, it stabilizes those around you. Your calm becomes contagious. Your confidence becomes an anchor for others. Just as fear can spread in a room, so can peace. And when you walk into spaces carrying God's presence, atmospheres shift. Not because you said anything, but because you embodied something. That is the power of his presence within you. So if you find yourself walking through life and noticing that, despite the noise, despite the pressure, despite the uncertainty, there is still a deep calm in your soul, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's just your personality or luck or coincidence. Recognize it for what it is, a sign that God is with you, a sign that his Spirit has taken residence in you, a sign that you are carrying his presence into every room you enter. Closing statement, peace is not the absence of storms. It is the presence of God within the storm. If you are walking in that unshakable calm while the world around you trembles, know this. You are not ordinary. You are carrying something divine, and that peace is heaven's fingerprint on your life, marking you as one who carries the presence of God. Another unmistakable sign that you carry God's presence is a heightened sensitivity to his voice and his leading. I'm not talking about hearing audible words from the sky or walking around with some constant mystical glow. I mean that quiet inner awareness, that undeniable nudge, that whisper in the soul that guides you when logic is limited and the natural mind falls short. When God dwells in you, you begin to notice that your inner compass no longer points in the same direction it once did. The things you once ignored, you can't ignore anymore. The voices that once distracted you, they don't hold the same power. And the decisions you once made impulsively, you now pause, you consider, and you wait, because something deeper is speaking. We live in a noisy world. Everyone has an opinion. Every device we own is clamoring for attention. Culture itself is designed to drown out silence, but God's voice rarely thunders above the noise. It often whispers beneath it. And those who carry his presence begin to notice that still, small voice in the middle of chaos. That sensitivity is not natural. It is spiritual. Philosophically, human beings are wired to seek meaning. We look for signs, for direction, for some assurance that our choices matter and our paths are guided. Without God's presence, people lean on instinct, or chase after superstition, or depend solely on intellect. But intellect alone cannot see around corners, and instinct often falters under pressure. When the Spirit of God lives within you, you are granted access to wisdom that transcends your experience. Suddenly, you begin to recognize promptings that don't make sense in the moment, but later prove to be protection or preparation. That is divine guidance. Consider how Jesus described the Holy Spirit. He will guide you into all truth. Guidance is not always about thunderbolts and visions. Sometimes it's a subtle restraint when you're about to say something you shouldn't. Sometimes it's the urge to reach out to someone at just the right time. Sometimes it's the boldness to step forward when fear tells you to step back. This sensitivity becomes a rhythm, almost like learning to dance with God. His lead, your response, and let me emphasize this. Sensitivity to God's voice is not about perfection. It's not about always getting it right or never misstepping. It's about posture. It's about cultivating a heart that is willing to be interrupted by God. Many people never hear him because they are too committed to their own script. But when you carry his presence, you begin to live with open hands. You're willing to be redirected, you're willing to change course, you're willing to admit that his perspective is higher than yours. Now, from a psychological standpoint, we might say that this kind of sensitivity develops as you train your attention. The more you focus on something, the more attuned you become to it. A mother can pick out her baby's cry in a crowded room because she's attuned. A musician can hear when a single note is off key because they're attuned. Likewise, when you carry God's presence, your spirit becomes attuned to his spirit. You can discern his voice in the middle of 1,000 competing voices because you've learned the sound of his truth. This is not about mysticism, it's about relationship. Think of any close friendship. Over time, you don't just know what the person says, you know how they say it. You can almost anticipate their responses because intimacy sharpens recognition. The same is true with God. The more you walk with him, the more sensitive you become to his leading, not because he shouts louder, but because you've learned to listen better. There's also something else here. When God's presence rests on your life, sensitivity to his voice often clashes with the expectations of the world. People may not understand why you walk away from certain opportunities that look good on paper. They may not understand why you invest time in places that don't make immediate sense, but you know something deeper. You're being led, and leadership from God doesn't always align with logic. Remember Noah building an ark before rain had ever fallen. Remember Abraham leaving his homeland without a map. Remember Mary accepting a calling that defied explanation. All of them carried God's presence, and all of them were guided by a voice the world could not comprehend. When you carry God's presence, your choices stop being dictated solely by the visible and start being shaped by the invisible. That doesn't mean you stop using wisdom or that you throw away reason. It means reason is no longer the ceiling of your guidance. It becomes the floor. Above reason sits revelation, and that revelation is the fruit of God's presence within you. This sensitivity is not just for your benefit, it is also for the sake of others. Many times God speaks to you not just about your life, but for the sake of those around you. He places someone on your heart to encourage. He gives you a warning to share. He stirs compassion for someone you would have otherwise ignored. His presence makes you a conduit, not just a container. You don't just carry his voice for yourself. You carry it into the world, becoming an instrument of his will in ways you may never fully see. But let me warn you, sensitivity to God's voice requires surrender. If you only listen when he tells you what you already want to hear, you are not listening to God. You are listening to yourself. True sensitivity means you are willing to be convicted, corrected, and even contradicted by his Spirit. It means his yes matters more than your comfort, and his no matters more than your pride. This is where carrying his presence becomes costly, because God's voice will not always affirm your desires. Sometimes it will call you higher, away from what is convenient and toward what is eternal. Yet, despite the challenge, this sensitivity is also one of the greatest assurances of his presence, because when you hear him, you know you are not alone. You know you are being guided, not abandoned. You know you are walking with someone greater than yourself. That confidence becomes fuel in the journey, reminding you that even when the path is unclear, the guide is trustworthy. Closing statement. If you find yourself increasingly aware of God's nudges, increasingly willing to be interrupted by his direction, increasingly sensitive to his whispers in the middle of life's noise, take heart. That is not just you being intuitive, that is the evidence of his presence within you. And if you follow that voice, even when it costs you, you will find yourself living not by chance, but by calling. Another sign that you carry God's presence is the atmosphere of peace that surrounds you. I don't mean a peace that depends on everything going right. I don't mean a peace that exists because the bills are paid, the job is secure, or the relationships are easy. That kind of peace is fragile. It shatters the moment life shifts. I'm talking about the peace that defies circumstances, the peace that Paul described as surpassing all understanding. When you carry God's presence, peace ceases to be situational. It becomes a spiritual environment that travels with you. Think about it. The very word presence implies atmosphere. When someone walks into a room carrying bitterness, the atmosphere changes. When someone carries joy, the space feels lighter. In the same way, when you carry God's presence, there's a peace that radiates from you, not because of who you are, but because of who is with you. And here's the thing, people may not even be able to articulate it, but they can feel it. They may say, there's just something calm about you, or when I'm around you, I don't feel as anxious. That's not you manufacturing serenity. That's the Spirit of God creating an environment through you. Philosophically, peace is one of humanity's deepest longings. Nations sign treaties for it, individuals pay therapists for it, and religions across history have promised it. But most of what the world calls peace is simply the temporary absence of conflict. That's not biblical peace. Biblical peace, shalom, is wholeness, completeness, harmony at the deepest level of existence. It's not the absence of storms, but the presence of stability within the storm. And that stability is only possible when you are anchored to something greater than circumstances, when you are anchored to God Himself. This is why Jesus, asleep in the boat during a storm, is such a powerful image. His disciples panicked because the waves were real, the danger was real, the fear was real, but Jesus carried the presence of his Father so deeply that he could rest even while the storm raged, and when he stood up and spoke, "Peace, be still," he wasn't only calming the sea, he was revealing that the peace within him was greater than the chaos around him. When you carry God's presence, you become that kind of person. You may not even realize it, but you start to bring calm into chaotic spaces. You start to steady people just by being steady yourself. It's not because you have all the answers, and it's not because you don't feel pressure. It's because you're drawing from a different source. The world draws peace from circumstances, but you draw peace from God's presence, and that peace is contagious. Psychologically, we know that emotions are transferable. Neuroscientists talk about mirror neurons and how human beings are wired to pick up on the emotional states of others. That's why if one person in a room is anxious, the whole room can feel anxious, but it also works the other way. When one person carries calm, it begins to calm the room. Now imagine that natural truth amplified by the supernatural. If ordinary human calm can shift an atmosphere, what happens when the supernatural peace of God flows through someone? Entire environments change. That's why you can walk into your workplace, into your home, into a hospital room, and even without saying much, the atmosphere feels different. That's not natural peace. That's the sign of God's presence. But let me be clear, this kind of peace doesn't mean you're immune to struggle. It doesn't mean you never feel the weight of life. It means that even when you are pressed, you are not crushed. Even when you are perplexed, you are not in despair, because deep down you know the one who holds the future also holds you. That knowledge doesn't erase pain, but it anchors you in it. And people who watch you, who expect you to fall apart, are stunned to see you remain grounded. That's when they realize you carry something, or rather someone, that they do not yet understand. Now, peace as a sign of God's presence also has a directional element. God often leads his people through peace. When you're discerning his will, one of the ways you know you're aligned with him is by the presence of peace in your spirit. You may not have every detail figured out, you may still feel nervous about the outcome, but underneath the nerves there's a settledness. That settledness is the Spirit whispering, "This is the way, walk in it." On the flip side, when you're about to step out of alignment, that peace lifts and you feel a disturbance inside. That's not just anxiety, that's God signaling that you need to pause. Sensitivity to this peace becomes one of the most practical ways God directs those who carry his presence. The world will always chase peace through control, controlling environments, controlling people, controlling outcomes, but here's the paradox: the more you try to control, the less peace you actually have. Peace isn't achieved by tightening your grip, it's received by opening your hands. When you surrender control to God, when you trust his presence, peace becomes the fruit. That's why those who carry his presence are not consumed with manipulating every detail. They live surrendered. And that surrender creates peace not only for themselves, but also for those around them. So if you've ever wondered why certain people lean on you in their chaos, why others call you in their midnight hour, it may not be because you're so wise or so strong. It may be because you carry the presence of the one who is called the Prince of Peace. And when people can't find that peace anywhere else, they sense it in you, even if they don't fully understand it. Closing statement: if you notice that you carry peace into rooms where chaos reigns, if you find yourself steady when storms rage, if others sense calm around you even when life feels uncertain, recognize this for what it is. It's not personality, it's presence. And that peace is the unmistakable evidence that God is with you. Cherish it, cultivate it, and let it flow, because the world desperately needs what only his presence can provide. Another unmistakable sign that you carry God's presence is a consistent hunger for righteousness. I don't mean a passing interest in being good, or a cultural sense of morality that shifts with the times. I mean a deep, abiding desire for your life to align with God's standards, a restlessness whenever you drift from his truth, and a passion to pursue holiness even when no one else is watching. That hunger is not natural, it's spiritual. It is evidence that the Spirit of God lives inside you, reshaping your desires from the inside out. Think about hunger for a moment. Hunger is not something you have to manufacture. When the body needs nourishment, it signals you. In the same way, when your spirit is alive with God's presence, it begins to signal you with a craving, not for junk food, not for empty pleasures, but for the bread of life, for the things of God that strengthen your soul. Just as physical hunger proves that the body is alive, spiritual hunger proves that your spirit has been awakened by his presence. This is why Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." Notice the language, hunger and thirst. These are not casual feelings. They are intense drives that shape behavior. A thirsty man will walk miles for water. A hungry child will cry until fed. When you carry God's presence, you can't be content to nibble on spiritual crumbs. You long for the fullness of his word, his truth, his ways. You don't just want to look righteous, you want to be righteous. That distinction matters because the world often settles for appearances. But when God's presence lives in you, appearances lose their appeal, and authenticity becomes your priority. Psychologically, this hunger is transformative. Human beings are creatures of desire. Whatever you feed on, you grow an appetite for. Feed on gossip and you'll crave drama. Feed on anger and you'll crave conflict. Feed on entertainment and you'll crave distraction. But feed on God's word and you'll crave truth. Feed on his presence and you'll crave purity. That's why a hunger for righteousness isn't about legalism, it's about appetite. God rewires your desires so that what used to satisfy you no longer does. Sin that once looked appealing now tastes bitter. Conversations that once entertained you now feel empty, and prayer, scripture, worship, things you once considered optional, become vital. That shift is evidence that you carry his presence. Philosophically, this hunger also points to a deeper reality. Desire always reveals design. The fish's desire for water proves it was made for the sea. The bird's desire for flight proves it was made for the sky, and your desire for righteousness proves you were made for God. When you feel that pull, that dissatisfaction with mediocrity, that inner yearning for holiness, it's not a random feeling. It's a reminder of your eternal design. Augustine captured it well when he said, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." That restlessness, that hunger, is not something to resist but something to embrace, because it shows that God is drawing you closer to himself. Now, hunger for righteousness will often set you apart. While others are content with half-truths, shortcuts, and compromises, you will feel convicted. While others excuse behavior with "everybody does it," you'll sense the Spirit saying, "But not you." That conviction can feel heavy at times, but it's actually a gift. It's God protecting you from settling for less than his best. People who carry his presence are often misunderstood for this very reason. They seem too intense about their faith, too serious about holiness, too passionate about the things of God. But that intensity is simply the fire of his presence creating hunger that refuses to be silenced. At the same time, this hunger isn't just personal, it's also communal. When you carry God's presence, you not only long for righteousness in yourself, but also in the world around you. You feel a holy dissatisfaction with injustice. You are stirred when truth is twisted. You can't sit comfortably when you see brokenness in your family, your community, your nation. That hunger drives you to pray, to act, to speak, to live in such a way that your life becomes a witness. And here's the beauty: just like physical hunger drives innovation, think of how the need for food has shaped entire economies. Spiritual hunger drives transformation. A hungry believer transforms their home. A hungry church transforms its city. A hungry people can transform history. But here's something important: hunger must be fed. Just like physical hunger can drive a man toward either healthy food or unhealthy junk, spiritual hunger must be directed. The presence of God creates the appetite, but it's up to us to feed it with the right things. If you drown your hunger in distractions, addictions, or shallow entertainment, you'll dull it. But if you feed it with prayer, study, worship, and obedience, it will grow stronger. And the stronger it grows, the more obvious the sign becomes that you carry his presence. Now, let me be real. Sometimes hunger feels uncomfortable. It doesn't always feel good to be dissatisfied. There will be seasons where you wonder, why do I feel like this isn't enough? Why do I crave more of God when everyone else seems fine? But that discomfort is actually your greatest advantage. God is using hunger to draw you deeper. He is using that holy dissatisfaction to prevent you from settling for surface-level faith, and if you respond to that hunger, you will find a filling that this world can never provide. So ask yourself, do you feel it? That pull toward prayer, that urge to turn away from compromise, that ache for more of his word, more of his presence, more of his power in your life? If so, that's not a burden, it's a blessing. It's not a flaw, it's a feature of carrying his presence. Because the closer you walk with God, the hungrier you become for him. Closing statement: if you notice within yourself a hunger that this world cannot satisfy, a craving for righteousness that won't let you settle for less, don't ignore it, embrace it. That hunger is not ordinary, it is supernatural evidence that you carry God's presence. Feed it, nurture it, let it guide you. And watch how that hunger transforms not only you but also everything and everyone around you.